My 10th grade high school biology teacher taught me two really key life lessons that I just wanted to pay forward to you. And they can actually be distilled down into like really short, just one sentence lessons. And frankly, the first one is you get out of something in direct proportion to what you put into it. And I'll later elaborate on that. But the second point is actually equally profound. And I found it to be incredibly nuanced as a sophomore in high school, learning about like all of these biological concepts like photosynthesis, for example. And there, my teacher, Miss Rosner, basically said that a lot of my childhood, a lot of my life lessons, a lot of my schooling up until that point in time had been a lie. But not only had it been a lie, but what she was teaching me was a lie. Like, I found this to be incredibly profound and meta. And basically the lesson number 2 was every truth is but a half truth. Every truth is but a half truth. So in 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, freshman year of high school, these years leading up to my sophomore year had effectively been half truths. But then so too was the photosynthesis that I was learning about in Miss Rosner's class as she's teaching me in a very self-referential way that everything that I had been taught, was being taught, and will continue to be taught is effectively just one piece of a much larger jigsaw puzzle, the onus of which to assemble is on me. Start with the first one. You get out of life in direct proportionality to what you put into it. So frankly, I will admit to how I learned this lesson, frankly, the hard way. And I learned this lesson from the same teacher who was trying to teach it to me, to disseminate this lesson. The same, 4'10" teacher who was just full of piss and vinegar and set me aside one day and called out my academic dishonesty. There's this project called the Ecosystem Project, and it was just a behemoth of a project. I mean, it was colossal. Frankly, the only way to actually land the plane, to actually be incredibly effective and frankly ace this project was to have really good time management, would be to actually piece it together sequentially and manage your time effectively, which I was notoriously bad at. I'm not sure if it's just neurochemically, but I've always been like pretty chill. And the problem is that I would procrastinate. I would procrastinate because I would be so chilled that I wouldn't feel any discernible anxiety until the day before it was due. And then I would stay up like all hours of the night to land the plane, to actually get the project done, to bring it to fruition. And the problem with doing that is very much akin to cramming for a test the night before, is that you can only do so much in one go-round. There's only so much that I could cram into my mind. There's only so much productivity that my effort could give rise to. Now, in my mind, it didn't really matter, because what I realized is that by procrastinating, by getting to the point where I was a little bit uncomfortable, maybe a little bit anxious, because literally the following morning, the whole thing was due, what I realized was that the marginal gain was astronomical. So yeah, like the longer you wait, the greater the ROI, but the less time you have to render that ROI. So it's like, yeah, per unit of time, per second, per minute, per hour that I spent on the ecosystem project, I definitely got more back than any other student who was working for months leading up to that point in time. But because it was for less time, the total output, the product of my time and the value per unit of time was still less than someone who had less quality per unit of time, but had simply way more time. So when you multiply those together, the product was that it was an impossibility for me to knock it out of the park by procrastinating, by spending one night on this project, by literally freaking stealing in an academically dishonest fashion my sister's ecosystem project, not in its entirety, but merely the parts that I struggled with. I was very, and to this day, very logical, very mathematically inclined. My strong suit is being well written, for example, and good numerically, but not artistically. If anything, I was too autistic. I couldn't contend with the demands of creative works. And so I got the bright idea to use my sister's work. I got the bright idea to plagiarize my sister's work and to literally just take directly from her project, her work, that unbeknownst to me, my freaking teacher had carbon copies of, not thinking that her 2 years younger brother would present her work as his own, but she had copies of because they were so exemplary. Of course they were. They were so exemplary that she would use those particular parts of the project as examples for prospective students for years to come. And then she sets me aside the next class after I present this as my own. And she has a talk with me about how it's not even the fact that I plagiarized. It's not even the fact that I was trying to get a good grade. It's the fact that that behavior wouldn't allow me to cultivate a good character in this life. It's the fact that the person who plagiarizes, the person who doesn't understand, reconcile, assimilate, and put the rubber to the road of the lesson, the first lesson that she taught me, which is that you'll get out of this class, you'll get out of this project, this ecosystem project, you will get out of this life in direct proportionality to what you put into it. It's the fact that in not embodying that, I was going to have to pay the piper down the road. So it's not the fact that I was pawning this work off as my own, trying to ace this class, trying to ace this particular project. It's the fact that that behavioral pattern has a lot of disconcerting presuppositions to it. It's like, it's precisely the person that would do that that doesn't feel like they have the resources, that they have the faculties, that they have the self-sufficiency to derive the A minus, the B plus for themselves. It's precisely the person that plagiarizes, that hasn't cultivated the character, that hasn't amassed the work ethic necessary to do that for themselves. It's precisely that person whose future prospects in this life will bode unfavorably because they haven't cultivated the character that would otherwise be capable of, as I often say, being capable of contending with life and its inevitably adversarial encounters. So Miss Rosner in 10th grade didn't say, "You're a bad boy, Jason. You're going to go to detention. You fail, you're done." She actually gave me the chance to make that work up, to actually learn the life lesson, to not just hear her expound upon this lesson, but to actually take the steps necessary to where I would actually have the emotional investment so that I would assimilate it experientially and not just understand it intellectually. That's lesson number one. You are going to get out of this life in direct proportionality to what you put into it. So if you're not particularly pleased, if you look around, if you look at yourself in the mirror and you're not happy with what you see, ask yourself, are you really doing your best right now? Focus on the inputs, and the outputs will simply be a lagging measure of that. The second lesson that she taught me is a little bit more esoteric in a sense and might not seem as practical on the surface. And it's the fact that every truth is but a half truth. And, for the first 11 years as a sophomore of K through 10 leading up to this point in time, it's like I just sort of took hook, line, and sinker the information that I was being given. And I never really questioned it. I never realized the nuance of truth itself, and to realize that tidbits are really part of this ostensibly much larger jigsaw puzzle, the onus of which to assemble, again, is on the individual. It's on you to assemble that puzzle and figure out how it's going to make sense in your life, in your context. I can give you the map that I used to find my freedom, to reverse a rare chronic disease, to become socially free, to be able to cold approach women, to have levels of enthusiasm, gratitude, and vitality that my appreciation for is ever growing. But at the end of the day, you have to actually take that map, take that legend, fine-tune, calibrate it, and figure out how it's going to fit in your life with your unique set of circumstances. I can teach you how to fish, but at the end of the day, you're going to be in a slightly different pond. You might have a different chronotype. Maybe you don't wake up at 5 a.m. to fish like I do. Maybe you prefer the afternoon. You're going to have to figure out what tools are going to be most useful to you in your precise situation. So just realize that instead of taking hook, line, and sinker every narrative, including the narrative that I'm espousing, so this is a very meta point here, is to realize that any lesson, every sequence of sounds, anything that I could conceivably utter is effectively just pointing you to something. My goal is to point you to the promised land. I just want you to have a better life. I want you to alpha up. I want you to be the fucking man. And I want you to get as much juice out of the squeeze of this life as you want to. I want you to be really confident. I want you to feel good about yourself. I want you to wake up with a heart-on for life. I want you to realize the virtues of masculinity, of sharing that masculinity, of having strong frame control so that you're not like a fart in the wind like I was for the first 20 years of my life, just getting outright, utterly, legendarily frame controlled by my sister, by my younger cousins, by this girl who I was head over heels in love with, monkey branch to, just being able to stand up for yourself and be like, wow, I'm a good dude and I deserve better. I treat other people well. I treat other people with respect. So maybe I should demand that of others in the way that they treat me. Having standards, no longer being a people pleaser, no longer being kicked down into the dirt of life by the boot of life. And realizing that if you do, there's always another chance. There's always practice for a bigger show. You can always get back up. And it's always about getting up just one more time than the number of times that you got knocked down. I love you very much. Thank you so much for tuning in and sticking to the end of this one, my friend. I hope this one resonated. Drop a comment down below. What was your greatest takeaway from this? Have you really understood, not just intellectually, but embodied emotionally, the fact that everything that you come into contact with life, any lesson that someone espouses, any sequence of sounds that someone utters is ultimately pointing to something, but that something is nuanced and is something that only you can find. I love you very much. Drop a comment down below, my friend. Like and subscribe for more content like this. And until next time, find your freedom. Peace.